Welcome to the Right Hand Roadmap, the podcast for seconds in command of founder-led companies. I'm your host, Megan Long, owner of Second First. In each episode, we show you the path to success on your journey as the #2 leader in entrepreneurial companies. I am so happy you are here. Each quarter, we do a question and answer episode answering listener-submitted questions. You have a few options to submit a question for our next episode, just like this. You can visit secondverse.com/podcast, and we have a submission box on that page. You can also email your question to podcast@secondverse.com. If your question is chosen for a podcast Q&A episode, it will be read anonymously. If your question isn't chosen, we still reply privately with any advice or suggested resources that we might have. And you all know the drill. I have to make legal happy, so I will give my quarterly disclaimer that this episode is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered legal or professional advice, and we're not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that arise from the use of this podcast, and the views expressed in this episode may not be those of the host or management. Okay, I all the time will listen to Q&A podcast episodes of other podcasts, and they say nothing like this. So I'm like, do I really have to read this every time? Anyway, all right, let's dig into the first question. I am working at a startup in year 3 of operating, but we're just now starting to really take off. As COO, I have been tasked with creating SOPs, processes, and procedures to scale. Our revenue growth goal is to grow by 300% this year. However, just between you and me, I'm not sure we're going to hit it because we do not have the pipeline to support that kind of growth. What do you recommend? So this is something that I have talked to some friends about. Something that I do as Megan Long is I will have VIP days or strategic planning days for entrepreneurs that don't have a COO or an integrator or someone in that seat, and they just need someone to help them create an action plan to actually get to their goals for the year. So that's something that I love to do. And one I did in Q1 was I met with 2 business partners. They were entrepreneurs. I think it was year 2 of their business. They wanted to grow, and they brought me in to put together a strategic plan for 2025. And they went in with the expectation that I was going to basically give them this playbook of systems and how to be efficient and productive and all of that. But we spent almost all of the VIP day talking about sales and marketing and strategic partnerships that they could make and referral partners that they needed. They didn't have any of that in place. They had no flywheel turning to bring in business. So especially when you're a new company, you have to get comfortable with building the airplane while it's in the air. If you stop selling in order to create SOPs, in order to create processes, in order to create systems, that flywheel will stop turning. And right now, especially if you want to grow by 300%, I would recommend that most of your focus and efforts be in how to hit that revenue goal. Especially growing 300%, things will break. So whatever systems and SOPs that you're creating for the business today are likely going to need to change once you're 300% bigger. So I'm not sure what industry you're in. But if I were asked by my CEO to create systems and processes to scale, I, first of all, would start with sales systems, marketing systems. How can you automate that lead gen? How can you get the volume in that you need and go from there? So when I spent the day with these entrepreneurs, what we focused most on were marketing. what was working, what was not working. We spent time on strategic partnerships and we spent time on referral partners and how to build out both of those. Especially if you don't have a large outbound sales team, those two were going to be the most impactful for them. So ideally, they can all come in and support and share the same client. I'm not sure how helpful that was, but I will tell you a quick story. So when I started at the company, it was the entrepreneurial high growth IT company here in Nashville that I came to and became second in command, COO, all of that. I had come from larger corporate organizations. So I practiced as a CPA for 4 years there's the big four accounting firms. They were five. And then I was a revenue manager managing a portfolio of hospitals for a national hospital management company. So very large organizations. And then I came to at the time they were like a 40-person employee company and started as the controller. And you know how it is at entrepreneurial companies. There's no playbook. It's really choose your own adventure, especially when you're in a leadership role. So the first thing I identified was they didn't have accounting policies. They didn't have accounting procedures, even like expense policies, right? Like the basic stuff that you're used to at a big corporate environment. Y'all, I spent like a week maybe, and this is before ChatGPT. I wrote this like 11-page accounting policy and procedure document because I thought that was the most important thing that I should be doing at the time. So where did that live? In the Word doc or in a PDF, just saved on the server, and it was the biggest waste of time. And I cringe thinking that that was the first initiative I took on. But I didn't know any better. Going back to your question that you have been tasked to create SOPs and processes and all of that to support this growth, really challenge yourself and challenge your CEO. Is that the best use of your time right now? And is it something that you can build and create as you're bringing the sales in? Okay, and question number 2 actually feels kind of related. So question number 2, my visionary, so again, companies that run on EOS, they use slightly different vernacular when it comes to titles. So usually the entrepreneur or the CEO is called the visionary, and then the second in command, COO, whatever, is called the integrator. So my visionary has set our forecast at 30% growth year over year. I was told to, quote, staff up. Do you recommend hiring in preparation of that growth, or waiting and hiring when your team is possibly overwhelmed and burnt out with too much work? Okay, I don't think there is one right answer here. I think it very much depends on your business. So hiring for growth is tricky. And if you have been on the executing side of a RIF or a reduction in force, you know that if you staff up too quickly and you have to undo that, it's extremely painful. It's terrible for culture and it's really hard to bounce back from. So I'm always hesitant to staff up prematurely, especially if you don't have funding coming in, like investment money coming in to support that, and you're just staffing up in preparation of organic growth. So the question I would ask you is this proven or unproven growth? So if you're forecasting to grow at 30% year over year, what did you do last year? And what did you do the year before? We benchmark inside of the Second First membership. So we ask all of our members to submit a handful of metrics each quarter, and then we benchmark them and kind of graph them against each other so they can see where they're stacking up against other entrepreneurial businesses. One of those is obviously revenue, and another one is employee turnover, like annualized employee turnover. Turnover last quarter, so Q4, was the highest I have seen it. Revenue last year in 2024, if I'm remembering correctly, it was down on average 6% across all of our members. The forecasted revenue for 2025 in our Q1 masterminds was an average of 18% growth. So all of our member businesses, on average, so the mean, were down 6% last year, but are forecasting to be up 18% this year. And when I saw that, I don't want to say I'm skeptical, but I think a lot of companies set revenue goals at the beginning of the year that are not rooted in fact or data, I'll say. So all to say, when we go back to your 30% forecasted growth year over year, is that proven? Have you proven that you can do that and that you can hit that? Or is that just what you would like to do this year? The other challenge I will make, and this is to anyone, this is not just to whoever submitted this question, because 30%, that is absolutely doable. I'm not cutting your legs out from under you. But I will say, forecasting revenue ever since 2020 has been really difficult. Pandemic aside, all of the PPP money that flooded the market gave businesses inflated spending power that they did not previously have. So we got really bad historicals in those years following the pandemic because they were all inflated. So it gave us all a false sense, I'll say, of what was possible in organic growth. Once that money dried up, we saw funnels slow down, sales cycles slow down. People stopped paying for contracts. It wasn't what it used to be. Then there was the election. Then we had ERC tax credit money that was finally getting processed. So some companies once again had this flood of cash. It's been so hard and so weird, and nothing has really been normal to try and nail down a pattern when it comes to revenue. The other thing I will say specifically about 2025 that we have been seeing with our Second First members, when the federal funding was cut for a lot of programs, for a lot of grants, for a lot of funding of businesses, even if your company wasn't affected, or even if your clients weren't affected, we have members, we have clients that support businesses that support businesses. I'm trying to think of like the degree of separation here that had their funding cut. So all of that has a trickle-down effect where now the businesses that support federally funded companies are going to see constraints in revenue that then are not going to have the spending power to support our clients and members. I hope that makes sense. But because of that trickle-down effect, it is affecting professional services companies, B2B companies that are like 2 or 3 layers deeper from those government-funded entities. Businesses that support nonprofits are going through a lot of uncertainty right now. Business in general is just really uncertain right now. I'll just say that. So we are seeing slower sales cycles. We are seeing longer decision-making times. We are seeing people are really looking for an ROI in any dollar that they invest in their business. So for any company right now that is projecting double-digit growth, I would recommend just really verifying that. All right, so I will talk about myself. So Second First, we 4x'd last year. Phenomenal, amazing, so exciting, so thankful. And then we planned to do rinse and repeat. Same thing this year, 4x. Well, after Q1 specifically, we are holding on a lot of the planned investments that we were going to make in order to do that this year, just because every entrepreneur I talk to is experiencing unusual sales cycles right now. So I'm working with a growth advisor specifically to help with a lot of that timing this year, just because things are not normal. So back to what my advice would be in terms of staffing up to support growth in 2025, I would recommend waiting until you have it in your pipeline, you see that flywheel turning, you have proven that you will grow this year before you make that staffing investment, right before your team is running too hot. So while still protecting the culture and while still protecting employee satisfaction, figure out what that line is, like right before you cross that threshold, and then start hiring. All right, and then number 3, the last question, this one is so relatable. Everyone is off track with their KPIs. I'm struggling to hold them accountable or even care. Well, there's no question, but I absolutely feel you and relate to you. And it can definitely feel like a head scratcher when it just seems like it's so simple. You have one or two numbers, like those are your one or two numbers. Going back to how I always would frame a scorecard or a KPI to an employee, sometimes, especially to just general staff, that can feel heavy. It can feel frustrating. It can feel like, how can you distill my job down to this one metric? And the way I would always frame it is your days are so chaotic. There is so much being thrown at you every single day that it's easy to get home and be like, man, I don't even know what I got accomplished today. It just felt like nonstop. So these numbers, these KPIs are a quantitative way for you to be able to close your laptop for the day and go home and say, man, today felt nuts, but I can look at these numbers and know I had a good day or I had a good week because they're green, because I hit my KPIs. Anytime that you can tie a metric or a number back to meaning of their job, like they're working towards the big picture. What is their job function that fits in to that 1-year goal? Giving their job purpose will always make them feel more connected to their metrics. The other question I would have for you is, are their metrics dependent on anything or anyone else? So another way that someone quickly loses connection with their KPI is if they don't feel like they can actually influence that number. So if they can't control their metric 100%. An example I'll give you is, let's say that you have a technician who their KPI is to complete 3, oh my gosh, okay, I'm making this up on the fly. Complete 3 new customer installs of whatever your product is a month. So they're either red or green on their KPI, whether or not they complete those 3 new client installs for that technician. But let's say sales isn't closing new deals. So sales isn't bringing in new clients. So how on earth are they going to be able to complete 3 brand new installs if there aren't 3 brand new installs coming into the company? So that's an example of someone being utterly disconnected from their KPI because they can't really control it. They can only control what they're being handed from sales. And then the last thing I'll say about this is, we always jump to, we have to hold this person accountable. We have to hold this employee accountable to this number. Well, the model that I love, and I talk about this in our masterclasses, I talk about this in coaching, I talk about this in presentations, David Peterson in the Evidence-Based Coaching Handbook has a model called the development pipeline. And it's, if you're listening, it's like literally a pipeline. So imagine a pipe, and there are 5 sections of this pipe. Accountability is the very last section. Before accountability, you have insight. Does this person know where they're failing? Does this person know what they need to develop? Second, you have motivation. Are they willing to invest the time and energy it takes to improve? Third, you have capability. Do they even have the skills and knowledge required to get where you want them to be? And then fourth is real world practice. So have they had the opportunity to even test out and develop these skills? And then finally, you get to accountability. And the reason that I'm telling you about these 5 sections of this pipeline is because if an employee has a block anywhere along that pipeline, they will not be able to get to accountability. You can't hold them accountable. So it's your job to figure out where along that pipeline they have the block. So while I don't have a magic bullet on getting employees to care, those are at least some considerations for you to make as to whether or not an employee feels connected to their work, if their metric is even fair in evaluating their performance, and then if they can even get to the point yet of being held accountable. As always, to find show notes and links for anything mentioned in this episode, visit secondfirst.com/45. Be sure to subscribe to catch future episodes and leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Remember, you don't have to navigate being a second in command alone when you have the right hand roadmap.